Digha Nikaya, there was a discussion between the Buddha and Ananda. Ananda was the three people to remember about in the story of the Buddha are Ananda, Sariputta, and Moggallana. So you need to know the roles these people play and remember the key part of why they were so important. Sariputta had this intellect, and he gives us really detailed information about how he practiced, and he teaches a lot of the suttas in here. He teaches, and in a couple of cases where the Buddha's back was hurting, he said, "You teach." Some people think the Buddha went to sleep. He didn't go to sleep. He had a bad back from another lifetime where he had been injured really badly. This was a karma pala. It means the fruit of past action. Karma means action, pala means fruit. So you have this, when you have an action, sometimes this energy will come across, and in this lifetime you're going to suffer from the pain of what happened. He was a fighter, a boxer in another lifetime, and he punched people in the back. Here, this is the story. So he comes in, he's the Buddha, he has this back pain. So what does he do? He says, I'm not comfortable sitting, I'm going to lie down. You teach this stuff, this particular part. And so Sariputta often he teaches, and the Buddha's right there listening, but he's not sleeping, he's listening. And Sariputta is teaching. So Sariputta has all this intellect. Moggallana, he has this he's the intelligent personality. He's into feeling. So when he develops his meditation, he develops his powers, his idis, they call it. So he's the one that has the very strong development of all of the idis, which are the divine eye, the divine ear, the reading of minds, the walking through walls, the flying, and all of that. And there's wonderful stories about that. One of my favorite stories is the Buddha is sitting under the tree, attempting to meditate, and there's Mara, who's always giving him problems. He's like the devil in the Bible, you know. And he comes along in the form of a dragon. He's flying around, right? And he's going to disturb the Buddha. He's going to stop him from meditating. And Moggallana sees what's happening. So because he can fly, he flies up into the air and takes a hold of the dragon. And we can't kill the dragon, of course, and that's the precept. So he holds the dragon around his throat until he's unconscious and falls to the ground so that he won't bother the Buddha anymore. So there's a story about Moggallana, does some great stuff. And then the Buddha is a combination of the intelligent and the feeling. He was both. As the Buddha, he had both these things completely developed. And anyway, the thing that was happening that morning, the other person is Ananda, and Ananda is in the story, Buddha's cousin, who turns out to be the Kappiya. The Kappiya is the serving person for the monk. I was the Kappiya for my teacher for really solidly for about 3 years or 4 years, and then as other people got involved, we have many Kappiyas who will help the monk. The monk can have many people can work as the Kappiya, the person who does all the things that the monk can't do because of his rules. You can do them for him. You can go buy his socks that he needs, or drive him places. Just lots of things. Okay. So Ananda's big contribution, great big contribution. Ananda has a memory that is an audiogenic memory. So whatever he hears, he can repeat exactly back to you, precisely word for word. In the case of where the Buddha ever gave a discourse someplace else, when he came back, Ananda said, "Will you do it again right now for me so I can hear it?" So he had all this. So when the Buddha dies, Ananda's big contribution is, well, it's kind of funny because he was so busy doing this, he didn't become an arhat, right? So before they got together at the end to consolidate the teaching the first time, after the Buddha died, they say you have to do it now. You have to take the time to get to be an arahat, because all the arahats can come to this meeting and we need you there because you're the one that has this memory and you have everything there. And so what happens is Ananda has all this information, everything, and remembers everything that the Buddha taught us. It's marvelous. And I've actually met a human being that was like that worked in government for the military, and could go in and listen to things and come back and report word for word. People have this kind of gift. This is a real thing. So he had this really extremely developed. Now they're together one morning, Ananda and Buddha, and Ananda is just feeling the Dhamma. He's feeling the Dhamma. He says, "You are such a magnificent teacher." You don't know if the Dhamma is, if the Buddha's putting his robe on or what's exactly going on in this story. You can't quite get the picture, but they're just by themselves and probably in his kuti, and they're talking. And so he says, "You are such a magnificent teacher." And the Buddha says, "So why am I magnificent?" He's testing him. He says, "So what's magnificent about me?" And one of the first things he says to the Buddha is the answer to my question. He says, "You are magnificent because you gave us the modes of progress." You know how it feels when you're doing something, when you're learning something, but you're not sure how far you're getting along and it's frustrating? I've had things like that in life. You're trying to, it could be anything, whether it's college or work or learning to ride a bike or anything, and you just don't know how far along you are. And the Buddha, we don't hear a lot about this, but the Buddha had taught the monks a mode of progress so that you can tell where you are in the development of your meditation, how far you've progressed, and if you're progressing properly in the way that you're doing meditation. That's the big question. And so there's these 4 modes of progress, and it's priceless, just priceless, very simple. You have the person who has a pleasant sitting and you have a painful sitting and slow comprehension. And he says that's poor progress. And then you told us, he says, you have a painful sitting but quick comprehension. And that you consider that poor progress. That's the second one. The third one is, and then you have learned how to have a pleasant sitting, but you have slow comprehension. And I consider that poor progress. But you told us that if we have a pleasant sitting and quick comprehension of the parts coming together like we're talking about in the weaving, taking the threads and weaving it all together clearly, if you have a pleasant sitting and quick comprehension, this is excellent progress. So that was the Buddha's measurement for if you're progressing, okay? So this left a lot of questions for me. Left a lot of questions because I had talked to so many people who had trained in a system where the pain is a good thing. Sit through the pain. Well, wait a second. This is there. But when I looked into why it was there, I found out they didn't know that scripture was there. That's the key to this. It's in the Digha Nikaya. People don't use the Digha Nikaya. If I went to use the Digha Nikaya with you, I would take one sutta and spend a whole week teaching you that sutta. That's hard work, okay? I did it. Bhante did it one time for us, and I'm there. Well, I don't want you to do that next week. Don't do that anymore, because we like pieces that we can remember that are whole pieces, and we can go out and sit and test for ourselves. So we make a lot more progress with this book. That's why it's so good. But this was a key issue. So pain was not meant to be there in the excellent progress of a meditation process. That's interesting to me. That's interesting. And so this is also very quickly, when I first went to meet Bhante, and the first night I was there at the temple in Washington. You been there at that temple? Remember how the dice, this part is high, and the Buddhist, and remember how the curtains are on the side? And there's space where they keep things behind the curtains. So we're sitting on the floor, and there's 5 of us out there sitting. And I expected, you know, I don't know if, Tammy, when I think you said you went and heard the story about how I found the temple, I'm not going to go into that. You can go on the internet and read it. But the thing was, when I got there, and the monk tells me that tomorrow night, yep, he's coming, your teacher's here, come tomorrow night, and you can start with him. He never told me who he was. Never told me a word. I went and sat there with 5 other people, and I expected this little tiny Asian person to come in that room and walk in and say, I'm your teacher, and start teaching. I didn't know who Bhante Vimalarayansi was. I had no idea. And in walks this 6.5-foot tall American who's Scottish descent and used to have red hair like you know. And he comes out, and oh, this is a big one. Oh my goodness. It's sort of frightening sometimes. He's so big. And he sits down and he starts to teach us meditation. And I'm doing everything he says, like what I'm teaching you here. And, but I keep going like this. Looking behind the curtains up here. Trying to hunt for something. Hunting for something. Well, as the story goes, the house I rented to live in was only a block away from the temple, and I was going there every day to work with the monks to teach them English and to study meditation at night. So I'm going there all the time. So the second night I'm there, I'm doing the same thing. Okay, so okay. And afterwards, I'm still looking over here, I'm waiting. And the third night I went to sit. Bhante Vimalarayansi says to me, okay, before we start, Ms. Overstreet, could you please tell me, what are you looking for? I'm sitting there, and I said, my friend, he told me that if I came to learn meditation, I should be sure that I know where the stick is. And he said, excuse me? The stick. I am supposed to just be aware of where the stick is, so when it comes and you start hitting me, I'll know where it's coming from. And he started laughing. He said, I am not going to hit you with a stick, I promise. So from then on, our relationship started to be a little better, because I knew he wasn't going to hit me with a stick. The stick, all the stick was about was the friend who put me on to this teacher where I should try and find him. And when I told him this was who I found, he says, oh, I have that book in Florida, the Chinese group, the Mahayana group, and the Zen group, they have that book. Everybody uses that book from the Annapolis. They all know about that teacher. We thought he was dead. And that's another story about the book. That nobody really knew he was an American from the way he wrote the book the first time, the Annapolis. And he didn't know what the book did after he did the initial 3,000 copies of the book. And people started reprinting the book in America and overseas and in Asia and all over the place. The book turned up in the Himalayas, turned up in Nepal, turned up in India, turned up in libraries all over the world. His teacher was Usamananda, the Venerable Usamananda. This is who Mahasi left in this country when Mahasi came here to start the Mahasi system of training. And he left him in California with the Burmese community to set up a temple on the West Coast. And so Usalananda was the teacher who Bhante had been a copy of for 2 years before he became a monk. And he was a small man and a small person, but very sweet, and he did things behind people's back. And he knew a lot more about computer than any of us ever knew. When he died, we figured out a lot of things that were happening that he had done. When we started working on the internet to try to see what had happened with the book and research how many copies had actually been printed, we stumbled across amazing things that Vimalarayansi had never been told about at all. Bhante knew nothing about it. No one had ever contacted him. We figured this happened because in the first book, it didn't say it was written by Bhante Vimalarayansi, it was written by U Vimalarayansi. U Vimalarayansi could be anybody that's Burmese. He was going through a Burmese line, being trained, and that's why they used that title when he first wrote that book. Anyway, the book turned out to have, within
2 or 3 years of researching the book, I had found over 800,000 copies of it all over the world. And then we started with translations, but we didn't do any translations. People came and they said, you know, we found this book, we want to make it in Russian. We found this book, we want to put it in Korean. We found this book, we want to put it in Spanish. That's what happened. We didn't do it. The students weren't there at the center. We haven't been doing that. The book is over 1 million copies now, in at least 9 to 12 languages. But we didn't do anything. Is that you found it? It's one of the early ones? Yeah, that's the first one. That's it. That's the first one with the little cross lines on the front, right? Yeah. And you see where it says Uvi Mimoyenzi on the front? See that? You don't know who that is, and there's no picture of him in there. No? Yeah, it's funny. Anyway, that's what happened. So Ananda was talking to him, and this modes of progress thing, it's just a tiny thing. 4 positions of modes of progress. And you find out what the Buddha considered to be excellent progress. It was pleasant sitting, so you want to be comfortable. You want to sit yourself in a position. This is why it's not important. If you're sitting on the floor, sitting on a chair, sitting on a rock, sitting in a tree, as long as you don't have pain. You don't need to be sitting in pain. Now let's talk about pain for a minute, just to clarify something. If you've never heard it, there's 2 kinds of pain. And the one kind of pain you do not want to confront in meditation, and that is physical pain. And then there's meditation pain. Now let's talk about what this means. When you sit, you should sit at least 30 minutes, and then you should get up and walk, or when you break. I'm not saying you have to have 30-minute pieces, but when you sit a minimum of 30 minutes, and then walk for about 15 minutes if you can walk somewhere. And then come back and sit. Don't sit for 30 minutes and say, oh, I broke. Stretch 5 minutes, sit down again. Don't do that. The best system is to sit for 30 minutes and then walk for 15 and then come back. If you're sitting for an hour, you can walk up to 45 minutes. 45 minutes, what we've determined is 45 minutes after that, it's not doing you any good to walk. Okay, so sometimes when you're in the very deep states and you manage to meditate while you're walking, it's a different story. So there's several levels that you can get into and keep walking. The ideal walker, the ideal sitting and walking should be done like this. You're sitting in meditation and you feel the urge to move your body, but you keep in where you are. You keep the level you're in, and you rise up and you keep smiling and you start walking and carry it with you and move. And you can do this. You can do this. First, second, third, fourth jhanas, you can do this. It gets a little more difficult when you're working in mental states, because it doesn't involve lots of another story. Different retreat. Okay. But what I'm trying to explain to you is you can take this joy and carry it with you to work and use it for the day. This is the usefulness of these levels, the first 4 levels that are the material levels, the usefulness of them in daily life. Okay? It's quite a nice thing to experience these and fall into the next one and fall into the next one and fall into the next one. That's like a meet and greet journey to learn what they are. But then there's more to do. There's more to do. Because you can learn how to develop determinations. What are determinations? Determination training. We start you when you come to a retreat for 2 weeks, and we say to you when you go to bed tonight, what I want you to do is you're going to get up at 5 and be in there at 5:30 for the first sitting in the morning. So what I want you to do is I want you to wake up at 4:55. So when you go to sleep, you say, I'm going to sleep and I'm going to wake up at 4:55. But your clock is set for 5 o'clock. This is the first step, actually, in teaching a person determinations. Mastery of determinations is a remarkable thing. Most people don't go that far, but just the basic bottom part of the training of determinations is very valuable, because once you have experienced these states, what happens to you is you know these states are real. That's the first thing that happens to you. And enthusiasm, or zeal they call it, but we don't like to say zeal because the Christians go into zeal, you know. But we say enthusiasm. Enthusiasm happens, and it's one of the steps in the development chart that exists, which we will talk about later. It's one of the steps that happens. You get to a place where these states are real, and you know it, because you're experiencing the knowledge and the vision of these states. So when you know they're real, you get this enthusiastic, I want to go further, it's really real. And it's also, you begin to feel, when you're practicing, you begin to feel that you've sort of like almost fallen in a river that's moving, and you feel the forward motion of wanting to go further. And a lot of the monks who practiced told me this in Sri Lanka. Yeah, they felt that when they were learning to do their meditation, they could feel this forward motion. See? So even if you're way back here, you're not anywhere near this, you begin to feel like you're going to go. And this is like the end of the Upanisa Sutta is precious to me because it gives you this wonderful, wonderful description of what happens in this. The Upanisa Sutta is where you go to find the development chart, the development line. And this development line, at the end of it, is summarized at the end that this development happens just like the rain that comes down on the mountain. And the droplets come down and they turn into little rivulets on the ground. And they turn into puddles, and the puddles turn into flowing into the creeks, and the creeks fill and they flow into the rivers, and the rivers fill up and they flow into the ocean. And that's where you're going, into the ocean. You're going into this purifying ocean. So the point is, even when you're at the level where the drops are coming down and they start to move down the hill, you can feel this motion, an internal motion of moving forward. Let yourself feel it. And when you discover one of these levels that you're passing through, these road signs along the way, remember you saw that, you saw the state, you have felt the joy come up at the first level. And remember that you lost the thinking and examining. In the second level, you stopped having the desire to stop in your meditation and think and examine everything. And the third level, you actually did feel the body falling away, disappearing. Maybe it was only your hands or only your wrists, but you felt the disappearance of stuff start to happen. What is that? Your body's not disappearing. What's happening? When we talk about the nirvana is no tension and tightness. How do you feel the body? Physically, scientifically, how do you feel the body? From the tension and tightness in the body, that's the cohesion of the body, that's why we feel the body. And so, if we are letting go and relaxing and smiling and staying light and opening constantly, the mind, opening, it's not going like this. It's not trying to get there by, it's not trying to get there, and it's not pushing, or it's not like this. It's opening to it. Like we said about the Buddha being under the rose apple tree. When he sat by the tree, he just relaxed, and he fell into this state. You can, that's what's happening for you. You can fall, but as long as we try, as long as we think we have to attain, as long as we think the urgency is there to make it to there, we'll never get there. Again, that's the Dhamma raga, the too much desire to get there. So trust it. Trust that the droplets on the top of the mountain, they're going to reach the ocean. And that's what it is. A whole bunch of droplets. The ocean.